with the question of there were people who were too anxious to come. Because what if I come and then you judge me for being anxious? Whereas anybody who's a little bit more honest with themselves will say it's not a question of whether or not we're anxious. The question is only how anxious are we? And the question is what's causing our anxiety. So just in case you did not have enough to cause you anxiety, and just in case you didn't see the daily video message that I send out, yesterday they moved the doomsday clock. Do you know what that means?
No, but I'm sure
Exactly.
I saw your video.
Exactly. It means a lot, or it means absolutely nothing, depending on who you are and where you live. But they made it into a big deal because essentially the doomsday clock, I don't know exactly when they started it, but it was essentially how close we are to a nuclear holocaust. That's the concept. How far are we from total apocalypse? So yesterday they moved it to the closest, so midnight is the indicator of when kaboom. And yesterday they moved it to the closest it's ever been to midnight. So it's now considered 85 seconds from midnight. How they work this out, I have absolutely no idea. But anybody who's into this kind of thing, that's enough to provoke some anxiety. Fortunately for us, we don't have to look that far in order to find anxiety. We have things that are happening right in our own backyard, that are happening in our own homes. We have many, many sources of anxiety. When I saw this thing about the doomsday clock, it reminded me of the story of the kid who comes home from school and tells his grandfather, he says, "You won't believe what we learned at school today. We learned that every single day the sun loses some of its mass. Few hundred tons of mass every single day," which is apparently the case. So as a result of that, they say that in 1 billion years from now, the sun is going to burn out and there'll be no more sun, and we're all going to die. So the grandfather's a little bit hard of hearing, sits up in his chair and he says, "What did you say?" So the child repeats. They said that at the rate that the sun is losing mass, in 1 billion years, that's it. So he says, "Oh, Baruch Hashem, I thought you said 1 million." It's a really, really good introduction to this conversation of anxiety, because essentially what happens is, if we're going to talk about why we're so anxious, one of the things we have to work out is, are the reasons that cause our anxiety justified? Or are they all these anticipations of outcomes and scenarios and possibilities, and who knows where my child is going to be and what they're going to be and who they're going to land up with, etc., etc. See that? As soon as I said that, people take deep breaths. As soon as you mention children, that's the trigger for Jewish mothers. But the question really is, like, are we sometimes worried about something in 1 billion years when actually it would only happen in 1 million years? In other words, do we bring anxiety into our space? There is healthy or natural anxiety, there's unhealthy, there's debilitating, paralyzing anxiety. So we kind of really have to work out what it's all about. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, they used to tell us the weather forecast. Do you remember this? Used to have the guy there with his radio aerial thing that he was using to point to the map. And this is a low pressure cell and a high pressure cell. And it makes any difference in our lives. If it's a low pressure, high pressure, whatever the case. It's kind of like when you get into a commercial flight and the pilot starts telling you which direction they're going to fly and what altitude. So frankly, I don't really care. Just get me there. So in the same thing, you don't have to tell me high pressure, low pressure. Tell me, will it rain? Will it be hot? Will it be cold? That's all I need to know. What else do you need to know? Now, I don't know if you've noticed this, but in the last couple of years, the Weather Service puts out these warnings. We're expecting a level 3 hailstorm. Like, what is that? What is a level 3 hailstorm? I mean, is it going to be big hail or little hail? Must I move my car inside, undercover, or not? Do I have to stay away from the windows? Like, how bad is this hail going to be? And what really struck me about this was, because I have children living in that part of the world, there was this massive winter storm that hit the northeastern United States this weekend. And it was fascinating to me because I was talking to my kids and they were reporting back on what they were seeing and what they were hearing from other people around them. And people were stockpiling food and preparing for the worst. And the way they described it was that they were using terms like killer storm. Now, we're not talking about a hurricane over here. We're talking about a snowstorm. Once upon a time, they used to call them blizzards. Now they call them storms, or ice storms, or level 3, category 4, whatever it is, snowstorm. And one of the reports that I saw was this is going to be the biggest storm they have had in half a decade. I'm thinking, well, hang on a second. Half a decade is 5 years.
Yeah.
When you say half a decade, it sounds like, right? But then you just like contextualize it, and half a decade is 5 years, which probably means this is a normal cycle of snowstorms, that every 5 years you have a big one. Like we have over here. Every summer we have a few big storms that knock out electricity, hit trees, bit of flooding for people who are living on top of rivers. Like these things happen, and I think they've been happening as long as we could remember. We've now assigned these dramatic associations to these things. So I was telling my kids, you have something to look forward to. There's nothing nicer than a blizzard in New York. It's beautiful because they shut the roads, they shut the airspace, they shut the subways. New York goes quiet. And then all the graffiti and the trash and the sewage is all covered with this blanket of white. Just savor those 3 days before they start with the snow plows and everybody walking through and it all turns to brown. Just savor those 3 days because it's absolutely beautiful. And so they were saying, well, how do you know? I said, well, because when I was living in New York, in 1995, there was a blizzard that closed the whole city for 3 days. And we were walking down the main road in the middle of the road, and the only sound that you could hear was crunching, because in New York, every 30 seconds there's a siren. And there's the sound of the screeching of the subway underneath you, and there's the sound of the planes overhead. And here it was just peaceful. So they took something which is actually a peaceful experience of living in that part of the world, and they've turned this into the apocalypse. And this is it. And then, of course, there's all the narrative about it must be climate change and this and that. And it's your fault, actually, because you're still driving a petrol car. So it's actually your fault that we have a snowstorm like this. And so the anxiety goes through the roof. So it just got me thinking. A lot of our anxiety is because of the way things have been framed, not because of what's happening, but because of how it's being framed. So the sun is going to blow up in 1 billion years. Oh, my gosh, I'm going to be anxious now. There's this major, and the reality is this storm that hit New York this weekend was not as severe as the one I was in 95. Because the city actually didn't even close down for more than a day. And with us, they closed down for 3 days. And with us, it was this beautiful, enchanted snow environment. And for them, it was like, oh my gosh, if you're not panicking, what's wrong with you? So it would appear that in today's world, we have succeeded in creating drama where there's no need necessarily for drama. And the media may have a part to play in that, because you've got to get clicks and you've got to sell media and you need to grab people's attention. And nobody is clicking on your article that says, we had a good week. The weather was decent. People went to work. They went to school. No major things happen. That's not selling media, right? So, and naturally it becomes the cycle of everybody, spinning more and more dramatic stories to get more and more attention. So perhaps the reason we're so anxious is because of other people, because of media or social media, because we're getting all the stuff pushed into our faces all the time, where previously we would never have even known that there was ice in Minnesota. And I mean the people, not the weather. Because ice in Minnesota, there's always at this time of the year. But we would never have known, let alone every kind of altercation and whether the law enforcement are in the wrong or whether the protesters are in the wrong. Now you have to have an opinion or whatever. It was never part of our life. It was irrelevant to us. But now you cannot turn on your social media feed without getting half a dozen posts about this and how terrible it is and what happened. So perhaps the reason that we're so anxious is because of media. And I think that would satisfy us to a certain extent, and it would dissatisfy us to the other extent, because, well, at least then there's a fix. If that's the problem, detox. That's all. Get rid of your Instagram, get rid of your TikTok, because we all are going to do that, right? Nobody's doing that. Because everybody has a justification of why they need that feed. There's this one person I follow, and they're very, very inspiring, and it's really, really meaningful, and that's why I have TikTok. Right, for that one person who's really inspiring. The fact that I doom scroll through 400 other people, before I get to that person, That's just how it works. That's the algorithm, right? But I'm really on the platform because it's like when Facebook first started. I remember when Facebook first started, so I was an early adopter of Facebook. And I didn't understand that the concept was, when they said it was social, I don't think they even used the word social media yet. They used the word social network. So it was a social network, right? And so I understood what a social network basically means, because in today's world, people who we used to be friendly with or our relatives live in other parts of the world. So this is a network to allow you to share with them. So the first time I got a friend request from somebody I didn't know, I was like, why on earth are you sending me this? Why would you send me a friend request, right? It was like, didn't make any sense. So that's what we do to ourselves, right? We say, the reason I'm doing this is because it's healthy, it's going to add value to my life, and then something enters the space that isn't necessarily adding value, and we just accept it. And before we know, we've got this whole network of this barrage of information and imagery that's coming at us. So if the issue is social media, the fix is relatively easy. Get rid of it. I actually did it last year. Got rid of I got rid of 2 of the social media platforms off my phone. That's it. Finished. So people are now very nervous because I haven't posted for months and months on 2 of the platforms, X and Facebook. But some of my stuff auto-posts to Facebook, so they still think I'm there. And then the other day, apparently somebody got my birthday wrong, apparently on Facebook. I didn't even know about it. And then somebody apologized that they didn't wish me happy birthday at the right time because they saw that there were happy birthday messages to me. And I was like, that's very strange because my birthday's only in like 3 months. So it was very odd. But there was a great sense of relief not having that whole thing of having to explain to people it's not really my birthday and you got this wrong. I didn't even know it happened. So there is an element, right? There is a relief that comes with getting rid of social media or media altogether. For those of us who grew up not watching TV as kids, as little kids, we had a TV and then we got rid of it. So you never had that. We never had that issue of the news and what's going on in the world, etc. But I don't think that's actually the fix. I think we're talking symptomology over here. That's one of the areas of life. I don't think that's where our anxiety is coming from. Because you could switch off your social media feed, you cannot switch off your kids. And there is a fair amount of anxiety that surrounds them. And depending on who your children are and what stage of life they're in, the reality is there will always be some type of anxiety associated with them. As there will be some type of anxiety associated with us, and they're all different levels of anxiety. For example, depending on where you came from to get to the shiur today, you might have had traffic issues because sometimes in Joburg, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but sometimes in Joburg, like the traffic lights don't work. Sometimes people, you're in a lane, but then there's another whole lane that's overtaking your lane, so you can't actually move in your lane because of all the people who don't belong in your lane that are driving in your lane, so you can't get anywhere, but then you try move out of their way, but there's a pothole on the side, or there's a beggar who's down on his knees, so you don't even see that he's there, and you could almost assassinate him on your way in. So here you are, you have a particular event that you want to get to, you'd like to get to the shiur. The shiur is going to start at a certain time. Those people who know how we run over here, we like to start on time. So you could be anxious, right? You could be anxious. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? I'm going to get there. And then all the scenarios, right? What if I get there and then I'm embarrassed because I walk in and everybody looks, who's this who just walked in now? Thank you for coming. Like, there are layers of anxiety, right? Or what if I miss something that's critically important right at the beginning? In the same way, by the way, and I'm very pleased to see that almost nobody's done it here today. But what we do, and I'm guilty as charged, by the way, what we do is we sit down in any setting and we put our phone right in front of us. Now, why do we do that? Usually because we don't have a pocket. But why do we do that? Why do we put our phone in front of us? Just in case. You don't know. You don't know what could happen. If you're a good Jewish parent, then you have a setting on your phone, if you know how to use your phone, you have a setting on your phone where even when your phone is on silent, the school can still reach you. Yes. Right? Exactly.
School Wi-Fi.
Exactly. The school. And what if the school phone? And by the way, if the school phones, then your anxiety. Because have you been paying attention to those pineapple ads? Mm-hmm. They are brilliant. Because they encapsulate all of the anxieties that people have. Right? What's the one? 99% downloaded, download failed. Yeah. Right? So the anxiety that goes with that. Or the person who says, you're on mute. You're still on mute. Right, there you are presenting in this Zoom forum with like a whole bunch of upwardly mobile business people, and you're trying to show them that you know what you're dealing with. You're still on mute. What's the other one that they have? Call me now. Call me now. And of course, the big anxiety that we all have is what happens. I don't know what system you have on your phone. Some of us have facial recognition, so it just unlocks the phone. Some of us have the fingerprint. Some of us have both. Sometimes the facial recognition doesn't work fast enough, so you start putting your finger onto the fingerprint scanner. But in the meantime, the facial recognition now works. Because your finger's there, it opens a WhatsApp message, and now the person sees that you've seen their WhatsApp message. And the anxiety that goes with that, because now, and what should I do? But I'm driving, so I can't respond. Or I can respond because I have voice to text, but then it misinterprets what I was saying, and then it sends it with the wrong word. We have so many avenues for anxiety in today's world. It's actually quite scary. In fact, that in itself is anxiety provoking. How many things in our world could cause anxiety, right? Let's use a really extreme example. Your child phones you, you missed the call, you phone back, and they don't answer. All right? Now, the scenarios that go through a parent's mind at that point could produce a Stephen King movie. In the meantime, the kid just wanted to say, is it okay if I stay for soccer after school? And because you don't reply, they just chose to stay for soccer regardless. And they've completely moved on. And you're like palpitating, you're trying to get hold of the school. Do you know where my child is? What's happened? Is Hatzola there? Right? So the question is our issue with anxiety the things, the stimuli? Or is our issue with anxiety our headspace? So I've been thinking a lot about this, obviously. That's why we're doing a share about it, because I've been thinking a lot about it. Because fortunately, I've mastered the art of calm and serenity. I experience no anxiety, and I'm speaking over here as an expert on the topic. Or more accurately, I'm hoping that if I tell you something, it will actually resonate with me, and something will shift. So go back in time. Go back in time. Imagine that instead of being born into this society in this period of history, imagine you were born in the 1800s in some shtetl in Lithuania, right? What would have been the causes, what would have been the causes of your anxiety in the 1800s? Right? Some epidemic, right? Whatever they had in those days, cholera, typhus, the plague, whatever it is that there were, right? That would be an anxiety that a person had. What other anxieties would you have?
Your husband didn't come home with a dinner.
Didn't come home, right? Correct.
With a bow and arrow.
Okay, so the person didn't come home with the basic necessities of what you need to eat. What other anxieties did you have? Or maybe the marauding members of the neighboring town are going to come on one of their pogroms and attack your shtetl. That was a real anxiety. There was the anxiety that the winter would be so cold that you wouldn't, God forbid, be able to keep your family warm and perhaps not survive. Right? Those were anxiety. So I just want to ask, do you think those are real causes for anxiety? The fear of epidemic, the fear of massacre, the fear of not being able to eat, the fear of exposure to the elements. Do you think those are real anxieties? They are, right? So do you think those people in those days were more or less anxious than us?
Probably.
Interesting question, right? It's an interesting question. I'm going to go with the theory that they were less anxious than we are. Not just because we are so, there's, I don't know if you've seen it, it's a great book, you should read it, by the way. It's not exactly on this topic. John Haight's called The Anxious Generation, about your kids and the anxiety around kids. Very worthwhile read. So you could call us the anxious generation, or you could call us the Prozac generation, and maybe they just didn't have access to therapy and medication and all that kind of stuff. So maybe they just didn't talk about it, or maybe they were less anxious than we are. And then we have to try and explore why that would be. because they will help us get to the root of what anxiety comes from. Does anxiety come from real issues, or does anxiety come from a state of being? Meaning to say, forget the people who lived in the 1800s. Why don't we just look at ourselves? Look at your child at the age they are now, and remember yourself at that age, and then compare the anxiety levels. So whatever, let's pick a median age over here, because we have it's quite a broad spread of ages of children around the table. So let's take a median age. Let's say that there's a child excuse me, who is an early teenager, 12, 13 years old. How anxious were you at 12 or 13 years old? Let's ask the question a little differently. What were your anxieties at that age? What were the things that worried you at that age?
Social, friends.
Right, what if you're not in the clique? Right? What if you didn't do your homework and you're going to be in detention tomorrow? What other were the major... What if you were waiting for your mother to pick you up from school and she was late and there was no way to know when she was coming? Okay? So there's no question that we had anxiety. And we had reason for anxiety. There's no question as kids. But do you think that we had the same level of anxiety as kids have today? Or, differently, do you think our parents had the same level of anxiety as we have as parents today? So what's changed? Has the world become a darker, more dangerous place? Or has something changed in our minds? So, okay, you could say both. You could say both. But then I go back to the shtetl. Was the world then a darker, more dangerous place? Right?
I think
So-
the world's become smaller.
Good. So that's the media element, right? So the world has become smaller, which is true. And that's exactly where we're going to start our conversation. It's not that the world has become smaller in the sense that more stuff is coming my way. That's true, but that's not the cause. That is a contributor to the issue. That's not the cause of the issue. Something else has changed. Something else has changed. And I hinted at it with that story of you waiting for your mother at the end of school and she's running late. What were your options if your mother was running late to fetch you from school? Wait. Or in my case, I could walk home. I lived close enough, it's a 20-minute walk. The only thing is, what if I start walking and she comes and then she has the anxiety? So I wait. And the only other option that you had was to go to the payphone in the school, put in money, phone home, but if she wasn't home, there was no point to that, because there was no other way to track her down. So what was your option? Wait. So you waited. And maybe you had butterflies in your stomach if you waited longer than usual, if you weren't used to it. I remember once, our high school day used to end quite late, and it was in winter. I remember once waiting. My mother hadn't arrived to pick me up. My father arrived for shul. It was like a funny, and there was no way for him to tell her that he was there, so she didn't have to come. Right? It was like a completely different reality. Okay, so now your child is waiting and you're running late. What happens? The child will phone you, right? What does that tell the child?
This instant gratification.
That there's control. When I'm a kid in the 80s, standing outside school waiting for my mother to come and she doesn't come, I don't imagine that I can control the situation. I don't believe it. It never entered my mind. I never thought that I have a way to control the situation. Your child believes 100% that they can control the situation because they will call you, you will answer, you'll contextualize for them, and maybe even if they don't get hold of you, maybe you've got Life 360. So they live with the illusion of control. Let's use a different example. You come home from school now. So your mom didn't pick you up. You got dropped off by somebody else. You were part of a lift scheme. You took the bus. Oh, let's talk about the bus for a second. Let's talk about the bus for a second. My grandparents used to live in Berea, and I went to Torah Academy. Right outside Torah Academy School was the bus stop for the 13 bus that went all the way up to the edge of Berea. So I would obviously prearrange, but I would catch the bus right up to Berea and then walk the rest of the way to their flat, which was like 15 minutes walking through Berea. Who around this table would be happy if their child went home on the Ria Vaya? I mean, it comes right here to Grayson. It's to Catherine Street. It's not far. It's not far. You can get off at the Catherine Street stop and then you can just walk home. It's not far. It's exactly the same as I did then on the 13 bus to Berea, just in reverse. And this neighborhood is probably as safe now as Berea was then. So who here would give their child a season ticket for the Ria Vaya bus system? Nobody, right? Okay. Anyhow, so you get home. You catch the bus and you get home. Now you come home and you're hungry, as any good teenager, because our model over here is a young teenager, right? So the young teenager gets home, the 13-year-old gets home and is hungry. What options does that child now have? Does that teenager now have? You want to eat. What are your options? Work it out. Right? Work it out. No phoning mom to say, what can I eat? Work it out. These are the available things. If you would like to have leftovers from last night's supper, take the leftovers, put it in the oven. Right? And that's going to take 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, till it's ready to eat. There's nothing you can do about that. That's how long it takes. Today, the kid's going to pop it into the microwave and stand there watching the countdown, you know? And then, yeah, exactly. And then be incredibly frustrated if they did it wrong and it didn't come out warm or evenly warm. And then it's a whole big thing. I can't put it back in for another, now I don't know, do I put it for another 30 seconds, another minute, whatever. Whole stress and anxiety. Over what? Over your mid-afternoon snack. Right? Okay, so now they've done that. So they got their food, they warmed up their food, now they're going to say, what are their options? This kid in the 80s and 90s, what are their options now to do once they have their food? What are their options to do? They can what?
They can eat,
sit down and eat, read a book, sit outside in the garden. Maybe you want to, I had friends who used to be allowed to watch TV in the afternoon. What could they watch already? I'm saying in the 80s, only came on later, right? But what could you watch already? I remember we had one kid in the class who had a VCR. So when we went to their house, we used to sometimes watch some whatever Shanana, whatever it was that we watched, right? But there was none of this surfing, PVRing, streaming. I don't know if I was this or that. Speed it up, slow it down, get the AI summary. Is it worth watching? Is it not worth watching? Right? Like it's a whole cheshbon hanefet, like this whole calculation you've got to make before you even watch the TV. Is it worth it? You're going to check. Maybe there's a social media group. Maybe you have a WhatsApp group with your friends. Should I be watching this? You get the ChatGPT summary of what the movie's about. What are the spoilers? In those days you went, and if it was the test pattern, you watched the test pattern. Otherwise you took your yo-yo. Right? KTV's after my time. So yeah, you took your yo-yo, or you bounced a ball against the wall, or you did swing ball, right?
Or you did your homework without a tutor.
Or you actually did your homework, exactly, on your own. On your own. What one of the greatest shifts that's happened in society is this shift to the illusion of control. So, we spoke about the weather earlier. In those days, when the weather came on after the news, and you had to wait, there was no way to speed that up. I mean, tell today's kids that they actually, can you imagine, they had to sit down and watch something, and there was no way to skip the boring parts, and you had to wait a whole week till the next episode. So that concept, you had to wait a whole week till the next episode. So anyhow, eventually the weather comes on, and if you go back early enough in time, you had to remember which day it was to know if it was going to be in English or Afrikaans. Right? So now the weather comes on, and they tell you the forecast for the week. You know, tomorrow's going to be 28 and sunny, and the next day partly cloudy, and whatever. Nobody in their right minds, in that period, in the 80s or the 90s, nobody in their right minds said, I now know absolutely for sure that on Sunday, when I'm planning my event, which is outdoors, it's definitely not going to rain, because they said it on the TV. You say, maybe they got it right, maybe they didn't. Today's world, you check 3 different apps, because you're not sure who's most reliable. Is it AccuWeather? Is it weather.com? Is it the app on my phone? All 3 of them said it's not going to rain. How's it raining? A chutzpah. I planned my entire event based on these apps. I had a guarantee. I mean, it's AccuWeather. What does Accu mean? And now it's raining. That illusion that we have of control is one of the key reasons that we have so much anxiety. Because expectation versus reality equals our state of mind. Back then, not so long ago, the expectations were not all that high. In the 1800s, in the shtetl, you didn't have the expectation that you should be able to vaccinate yourself against an epidemic. It was part of life that, unfortunately, epidemics killed people. You didn't have the expectation that your neighbors would all be friendly with you. So pogroms happened, and they were absolutely tragic, but you didn't expect differently. You didn't expect that you would have fresh food on the table every single day. So you weren't disappointed when it didn't happen. Whereas today, because we've created this high level of expectation of our degree of control of our lives, that has been one of the main contributing factors to our increased anxiety. So you know what's fascinating about this? We have precedent. You know, anything that's happening in the world, you can dig back into the Torah and you can find where in the Torah it talks about exactly this thing. If you go back to the origin story of the Jewish people, you will meet a character who, I promise you, every one of us in our wildest dreams would never believe that we have any association or relationship with this character until we think about it. And then we realize, oh my gosh, we are very similar. Which character is this? Pharaoh. Now, nobody ever sits at their Pesach Seder and says, I resonate with Pharaoh. You know? He's my guy. Like we understand each other. Nobody ever says that, right? You go through the Pesach story, and either you're assessing which of the 4 sons would I be, or you're hoping that I'm kind of like Moshe. But on examination, we really have something deeply in common with Pharaoh. So I want to go through the story of Pharaoh just for a moment. We all know the story, right? Everybody knows the story. Pharaoh's the bad guy. He enslaves the Jewish people. Hashem tells Moshe that they have to go, and if he doesn't release them, there's going to be the plagues, etc. So we all know the story, right? And that's what happens with these stories. Any story that we believe that we know, those are the stories we really don't know. Because we're so comfortable with the story, we never think to ask questions, we never think to dig deeper. So let's dig deeper for a moment. The very first time that Hashem sends Moshe to Pharaoh, so Moshe's got his whole presentation, you know, he's got his PowerPoint and he's got his 3D imaging or whatever he's going to do over there. And he does. I mean, he has sticks that turn into snakes and water that turns into blood. It's quite a presentation, right? He comes to Pharaoh and he says, listen, Hashem says, let the Jewish people go. What is Pharaoh's immediate response? What's that? See? Exactly what I mean. We all are still in the nursery school version of the story, because in our minds we know that he goes, no, right? So as far as we're concerned, that's the story. That's not what the Torah says. Before he says no, he says something else, which is critical. Before he says no. What does he say before he says no? Who is Hashem that I should listen to his voice? Mi Hashem asher eshma b'koiloi. Who is Hashem that I should listen to? He doesn't say, who are you? Who are you, Moshe? It's fascinating. Here's the man comes bursting into the palace and says, right, we're going to be changing everything over here. And the natural response is, who do you think you are? He doesn't say that. He says, who is Hashem that you are officially representing, that I should listen to his voice? There is an echo of Pharaoh in our brains on loop, which is basically saying, who is Hashem that I should listen to his voice? The translation of that, if you put it into Google Translate, is, I know what I'm doing. I got this. And we all live with the illusion of, I got this. And that's why we're so anxious, because we've got to have this. We've got to have that control. If I believe that I have that degree of control, or that I'm entitled to that degree of control, it is going to produce a tremendous amount of anxiety. The bigger my responsibility, the more anxious I'm going to be. So, for example, when we walk around believing that if I come late to pick up my kid, they will have secure attachment issues for the rest of their life, and they're going to be in therapy forever speaking about me because of the one time I came late, which illustrated that I don't really love them, then I'm going to carry a lot of anxiety. Whereas if you just realize that life happens and we're not always there in our best form, and we don't always get there on the time frame that we want, and we just realize Hashem has a plan, and that plan includes bumps along the way, then I don't have to control this, I don't have to hold this, I don't have to be anxious about it. But that's not where the story ends. The story gets much more fascinating, because in the Haftarah that we read, when we start to read about the miracles of the plagues, the Haftarah that we read every single year is from the prophet Yecheskel, Ezekiel. And the prophet Yecheskel speaks about Pharaoh, and he gives this description. Fascinating. Listen to this description. He says that Pharaoh's mantra was, the river is mine, and I made myself. You hear that? The river is mine, and I made myself. Which river is he talking about? The Nile. The Nile River. I don't know how good your geography is. Do you have any idea how big the Nile Delta is? Do you have any concept of how massive that whole water network is? Probably on a map, I haven't measured it exactly, but probably on a map, it must extend down a quarter of the length of the whole continent of Africa. It's massive. At some parts, the Nile is so wide that you can't see from the one end to the other. How much of the Nile do you think Pharaoh ever saw in his lifetime? Ever in his lifetime. Without speedboats, drones, helicopters. I mean, in his little papyrus canoe. How much of the Nile do you think he ever saw in his life? I would assume a tiny little fraction. And here he is saying, the Nile is mine. I got this. That is the source of all anxiety. This whole big system is mine. And I have to make myself. I have to make it work. The burden that we are carrying in today's world is so advanced, it's so big. Just like the Nile that spreads into this whole delta of rivers and tributaries, there are so many elements of the network that we believe that we have to control in life. No wonder we're anxious. And our kids, by the way, the same. Because all of the things that our kids are trying to hold in their heads, their academics, their sport, their social, their cultural, their expectations of society, the threats of society, the fact that they're exposed to global news at an age where they should not have to care about any of those things, the trends that they hear about, you have no clue what they're being fed on social media in terms of what it's... I'm not talking about the rubbish. I'm talking about information that is premature for them. I once heard somebody say, they were talking specifically in the context of educating children about their bodies and about relationships and about sexuality. So this person said, and I think it's very profound, that if you share information with a child at an age that they are not yet ready to hear it, that is a form of abuse. It's managing this mega network that's causing our anxiety. I have to be a self-made person like Pharaoh. I have to make myself, and I have to control this whole river where I only really have access to this tiny little portion of the system. Tiny portion. And when we're honest about it, that is exactly how life works. The amount of things that we truly control are extremely limited. Now, if you were back in the 18th century, facing the dangers of severe weather, malnutrition, epidemic, massacre, you never faced all of them simultaneously. Because if it was bad weather, the likelihood is the guys weren't coming to attack your village because it was bad weather. And if it was a time of disease, the likelihood is all the resources and all the concern went into that area of how do I protect myself and my family from the disease. Meaning to say, they had much more severe causes of anxiety, but they had singular causes of anxiety, or maybe on occasion 2 causes of anxiety simultaneously. Whereas for us, we have so many causes of anxiety that the scale or severity of what those causes are becomes irrelevant because it's just an assault on the system. So it's essentially the difference between sending one big intercontinental missile or a whole swarm of drones. If you send a single missile, it might have this terrible warhead, but it's easy to defend yourself. When you send hundreds of drones, it overwhelms the defense system. That's where we're living. We're living on this little piece of river, believing that we have to control the entire delta. It's no wonder that we're anxious. It's no wonder that our kids are anxious. So if the need for or illusion of control is causing our anxiety, there's an expression that we use in Torah where we say, knowing the illness is already half the cure. If we recognize that that's what it is, it's actually not the severity of what's happening in my life, but it's rather the intensity or the magnitude of what's happening in my life. That's what's provoking the anxiety. So then we have some kind of indication of where we go from here in order to manage it. You know, if you ever read, for example, Viktor Frankl. So his whole concept, which wasn't a theory in a lab, it was his lived experience in a concentration camp. So his theory of how people survived the concentration camps, again from his own experience, basically boiled down to one point. If somebody had either a person they were caring for or a person who was caring for them in the concentration camp, their survival, the chance of survival went up exponentially. One thing to focus on. That one thing was more severe than anything we could ever imagine in our wildest dreams. But it was one thing to focus on, so they could do it. They could find that resilience, they could find that power, they could find that capacity to just survive, to make sure to survive. Whereas we today may not have anything nearly as severe as that, but because it's a swarm, it's overwhelming our systems. And the swarm is not created by the world. The swarm is created by our view of the world, our interpretation of the world. So, anybody here into roller coasters? Well, I'm certainly not, but at least we have one adrenaline junkie in the room. So if you're on a roller coaster and you're about to go over to the big dip, what's the one thing you shouldn't do as you go over?
Look down. I don't know.
The one thing you shouldn't do is tense up. The more tense your body is, the more you will feel that sensation of falling, and the more it's a scary experience. Whereas when you relax, it becomes a pleasurable experience. There's quite a lot of research about car accidents where people who are involved in drunk driving accidents, so the drunk driver is often injured less severely than the passengers or the people in the other vehicle. And the reason that they explain that is because when you anticipate that there's going to be impact, your body naturally tenses up, and that tension creates more of a brittle impact. Whereas the drunk person is unaware of the fact that it's about to happen, so they're in a more relaxed state, so the body can absorb the impact. Holding on to control, which is what we naturally do, and what we have been in many senses conditioned to do, either through technology or through whatever exercises we've been taught, do this in that situation, do this in the other situation. We're holding tight. And you can only hold tight for so long before it begins to either hurt or before you fall. So if the cause of our anxiety is that sense of needing to be in control, however we landed up there, if it's because of the ease of technology that I should be able to have hot food within 2 minutes, I should be able to have groceries delivered to my house within an hour, I should be able to get somebody to pick me up if I can't drive within 5 minutes, and my gosh, what is wrong with these people? You can't even find me a driver within the first 2 minutes. Like, the whole system has failed. Because we've been conditioned that you click and download, and so therefore if there's sluggish internet, you may as well go back to your cave. Because we've been conditioned that you can hop into a plane and in anywhere in the world, you can be there in less than 24 hours. I mean, it's unimaginable to anybody from previous generations, so they would have traveled for 3 months to get across an ocean. And for us, if it takes, I'm not choosing to go that way because there are too many stops. Right? So because we've been conditioned to believe that we can control every element of our life, which is positive, there are many positive things, it has had a negative result that we have the anxiety of having to control every area of our life. So the healthiest thing that we can do is learn how to differentiate between the things we can control, the things we cannot control, and the things we don't have to control. And the more we learn how to do that, the more we start to breathe easy. So everybody's going to tell you need to do breath work in order to relax. Well, maybe you need to relax in order to breathe. Maybe we need to shift our mindset to be able to breathe. Now, it's everything is divine providence. The fact that we're having this show today is incredibly significant because today is the 10th of Shvat. 76 years ago today, the previous Rebbe of Chabad passed away, and a year later, our Rebbe took the leadership of Chabad. And both of them, the previous Rebbe in writing before he passed away, and our Rebbe in words in his so-called acceptance speech, both quoted a very, very interesting midrash based on a verse in King Solomon's Song of Songs. And that became almost, if you wish, the iconic phrase that represents this day and what it means to the Jewish world. Because the verse says, it's Hashem speaking, and Hashem says, I have come to my garden. Bossi Legani, I have come to my garden. So the previous Rebbe in his final discourse, which he wrote and asked to be distributed for that Shabbos, he passed away on Shabbos, so everybody thought it was for his mother's Yortzeit, which was on the same day. In the meantime, it turned out being the day that he passed away. So the previous Rebbe explained that Hashem designed our world to be a garden. Think about it. The first humans were put into the Garden of Eden. The world was designed to be a garden. And all Hashem wants is to re-enter his garden. Our Rebbe developed the theme further and basically said, when we do what we're supposed to do and we get Mashiach to be here, we'll re-experience what it is to be in that garden. But the point is, even before that happens, every single day of our lives, we get to choose which world we live in. People often say, it's a jungle out there. We often believe that the world is in a chaotic space. The reason that they moved the doomsday clock is because of concern of global instability. Russia, Ukraine, the whole Middle East, North and South America, North and South Korea, China and Taiwan. There's a lot of very difficult and challenging scenarios happening in the world, and there's a belief that any one of these could explode into a catalyst of World War III. That is if you live believing that the world is a jungle, and then feeling this tremendous anxiety because I actually can't control it, but I'm supposed to be in control. In other words, I'm supposed to be in control because I'm supposed to be able to have the power to vote, which is supposed to get the right people into power, who are supposed to make the right decisions, that are supposed to de-escalate these things so we never get here. And here, the greatest democracy in the world seems to be one of the greatest destabilizing forces in the world right now. And that's not a political statement. That's just the nature of what's going on in the world. Or I can believe I'm actually living in a garden. Not because I'm delusional, because you get those too, but because I realize that this world didn't just fall into existence. It was made with a purpose. And the way it was made was that the things I cannot control, those are the things Hashem controls. Hear the difference? For most of us, the things I cannot control belong to the law of the jungle. And so, boy, is that dangerous. Because if I don't control, if I don't protect my child, if I don't organize my schedule, if I don't, prepare the meal, all these various things, if I don't do it, the law of the jungle will prevail. So if I can't reach my child on the phone, I start worrying about the law of the jungle. Which wild beast got hold of my child, God forbid? That's what I start thinking. It's completely irrational, but that's what I start thinking because I'm living in a jungle. I'm living trying to control the whole Nile Delta, which I think is this wild place, and all I've got access to is my little piece of river frontage. What a Jewish person is supposed to train themselves to understand and believe is, I'm living in Hashem's garden. The garden can sometimes be overgrown, it can be wild. Things can happen in the garden, but at the end of the day, the garden has a guide, an owner. I don't have to take control. I don't have to take control of whether it's going to rain or not. I don't. It would be nice, but it's not a reason to be anxious because there's nothing I can do about it other than to plan, other than to put in contingencies. But to believe that because the app said X, I should be able to control the weather, that is just going to cause me anxiety. To believe that just because I cannot reach my child means something devastating happened to my child is firstly statistically inaccurate. Because let's be honest, 99.9% of the time that we cannot get the child's response, it's completely benign. So why is my mind going to the 0.1%? Because I believe I'm living in a jungle. But if I believe I'm living in a garden, and the nature of that garden is that children become independent from parents. That's how the garden works. And in doing so, they make mistakes and they fall and they hurt themselves. That's how the garden works. That's how they become stronger people. Then I don't have to be anxious about every single part of life. There are enough things that deserve my anxiety, that I don't have to squander my anxiety on all of those things that are just a waste of worry. Somebody once told me that worrying is like sitting in a rocking chair. There's a lot of energy, but you don't go anywhere. In his book, in that Anxious Generation I was talking about, one of the most fascinating parts of the book, and I quoted it in one of our other shiurim, was he says they did this experiment in the Arizona desert where they built a biosphere to try and model what life would be like if they made a colony on Mars. And one of the things that they wanted to see, would things grow normally? How would you manage the oxygen levels, etc., etc. So one of the things that they found is no matter what kind of tree they planted, the trees, when they reached a certain height, cracked and fell over. And they couldn't understand why. So they did a lot of research to work it out, and eventually this is what they found. It's really, really interesting. They found that when trees grow, one of the natural things that happens is the wind will blow the trees. You go to the Sea Point Promenade, and you know exactly what that is, right? So the wind will blow the trees. And from that buffeting of the trunk of the tree, it forces the molecules inside the bark of the tree to bond together in order to resist the wind. When they bond together, obviously they become stronger, then the tree can grow higher. In the biosphere, there was no wind. So there was nothing to buttress the trunk, so there was nothing to force the molecules together, so it never became strong enough to be able to grow high. And essentially what he says is, the lesson for him is, if we protect our children too much, we never allow them those external elements that push them a bit, that distress them a bit, so that they can learn resourcefulness, resilience, the ability to function in the world. That's where anxiety becomes not only unhealthy for us because we feel terrible, but actually stunts the growth and development of our kids because we're micromanaging, or we're stepping in, or we're protecting them at a time that they should be able to grow. If you want to have a garden, if you want to have Hashem's garden, you have to be able to have trees. If you want to be able to have trees, those trees need the freedom to grow. If you want them to have the freedom to grow, you have to allow some of your anxiety to go unresolved. Because keeping ourselves feeling calm could be blocking those trees from becoming Hashem's garden. So what's the core reason that we're so anxious? Is that we have this illusion and addiction to control. What is the first step we could take to start relinquishing anxiety? Is to realize that there is someone in control who really knows how to make a beautiful garden, if we'll just participate as partners rather than as controllers.